Hello again, it's Phil Story, a network detective from Australia. Because analysing transactions is really the key strength of NetData, the performance chart is one of the main charts that we're ever going to look at. And because of that, and because I want to keep these videos short, broken it up into two parts. So this first one will just introduce you how to interpret the things that are on the chart, and then in the next part we'll delve into a bit more detail. So just a reminder, why would anyone want to use NetData? And basically it's about visualizing IT performance. It's about exposing underlying behavior of the application or underlying behavior of performance via visual charts, which essentially mean for the analyst, NetData tries to make things jump out at you. So this one, we're talking about the performance chart, this one, and there's some tables and then a slave chart that I'll just introduce you to. From my hints and tips document, we're going to be looking at the format button on charts. We're going to be zooming in and zooming out. We're going to right click on things. We're going to hover the cursor on things, and we're going to use pop-ups with the Alt keys. When we left off in the last video, we were looking at this PacketBomb slow web case study. So we could drop that back on again, but because that's the same packet capture file that we looked at before, all we have to do is launch NetData, and we don't have to do the analysis again. So we can simply press the dialogues button and get the dialogues. What I do want to do is in the chart menu, I want to turn on all the things that I usually turn on. We'll do it this way this time. I want to see events. That'll do. Now that we've said what we want to see on the performance chart, we can right click and chart records of this server. Service versus server is one port or all ports. And here we are. So first of all, because I asked for connections, we get a connections table with information about all the connections involved with the transactions on this chart. Columns, and we can turn on various bits of information. I'll leave that to you. We also, because I asked for events and warnings, we get this table. And just expand that a little bit. And what we can see in here, we can sort, say, by category. And application category, there's three. So there's a 400 and two 404s. These are applications, so in this case they're HTTP errors. NetData is just saying you might be interested in those. So now we come to the actual chart and what's going on here. And I'll jump to a PowerPoint. It's very important that we understand what these symbols on this chart mean. This is the NetData transaction representation. It'll be a PDF in your docs directory. What are these symbols on the chart? So you see this line here. This is what those chart symbols look like. Now, so the left-hand edge of the horizontal line is the first packet of the client request. If there's a large client request, then there'll be this vertical tick symbol so that we can visually see that's how long it took the request to get sent to the server. Then there'll be a coloured symbol and a different colour, a different shape. That is drawn on the line where the first packet of the server response occurred. And then of course the end of the line is the last packet of the server response. So the full line represents the full timing of the transaction. And I've drawn these descriptions down below with colours. So NetData uses green for requests, yellow for server time, blue for response duration. Now if it's a single packet client request, which is pretty common, the first part of the line will be server time, and the second half, if any, will be the response duration. We can tell if the time is being consumed by the server thinking about things, or is it consumed by delivering large amounts of data across the network. As an extra bonus, NetData will draw a pink square around the transaction if the packets making up that transaction were involved in some kind of network abnormality, such as a retransmission. And so in HTTP, it's pretty common that we just have one line with a symbol at the end, and that just basically means it was all server time. And so the colours again used. I've introduced a new orange bar, and what this is, and when NetData draws charts that display these colours, then the orange is the time it took the client packet to get to the server. Then we have the real server time, and then the time that the server's response took to get back to us. Wireshark has this idea of server response time. That by default, that's the first packet of the request to the first packet of the response. You can change it in Wireshark to be the last packet of the request and the last packet of the response. Now Transum, which was put together by Tribe Labs in the UK and is now built into Wireshark, it has a similar idea as NetData, and they call it request spread, service time and response spread. And you can actually get those figures for some protocols in Wireshark. And they call the whole transaction the APDU response time. Why is displaying transactions like this so powerful? It's because we can end up with charts like this. But that's not for this video. So now we can tell by looking at this transaction, it was a 14-second transaction because it's at the height 14 seconds. It started at that time. The horizontal time is time of day. So it started then and it finished then, and it was all server time. And if we hover on it, and I can Alt-Z to lock that on, then we can see it's 14.2 or 14.3 seconds of server time. It was a 30K response, and that came back very quickly. There were two more here, but there are some little ones down there. I can lock that on too. And we can see what it was. It was a get. Now Alt-R will get rid of those. And we can also see down here, there was a cluster of a lot of transactions, and some of them have got pink squares. So, and also that symbol is at the left-hand end. So again, I'll lock that on, Alt-Z. And we can see that it was a 394 byte request. That server took 143 milliseconds to respond, and then there was 193 kilobytes of data to be returned, and that took 800 milliseconds. And that's why the symbol is close to the left-hand end. So while we're here, format control window. So format control is all the things we can do on this chart. But rather than have that, let's have, say, throughput. Now throughput will report or draw a line of the right-hand scale responses per second. So what we can tell here is there weren't many responses, but this time here we ramped up to 63 requests. So these 63 transactions all came in pretty close together. While I'm here, the bottom right corner tells us that there's 190 transactions on the page. Just to keep the chart neat, I'll turn that off. Another thing we can have is transactions in progress. While I'm here, look, I'll just add some more legends because we've got plenty of room. So we've got a couple of extra items. Now transactions in progress now is this line, and what we can tell is that there were only ever 5 or 6 transactions in progress. So that might indicate some kind of thread limit or something of that nature. But we're seeing that there were never more than 6, and we can probably bet there were never more than 6 concurrent transactions. And therefore, yep, of course, we can only do 6 transactions at once. And I'll turn that off too. What I'll do is zoom into this now, and that will make those essentially pop up. We've got that one left. There's a transaction there with, it's a get, and again, it's the 50-50 split of server and response time. And if I come to the left a bit more, we can zoom right in. So another neat trick is if we hover on the legend items here, you notice that went yellow and it says a count of 4. So we can see 4 yellow diamonds, and in fact Alt-Z locks that on. That feature is only a month or two old. It's quite nifty. Alt-R. So what else can we do? Well, there's a trans button up here. That gives us the actual transactions. So here is a table of all the transactions that were on this chart. This is length of request, length of response. We can say, okay, click that. Purple means sort descending. So the biggest transaction on the page was 202K, and it was this image. Now, while we're here in the chart, if you right click describe transaction, the transaction decoded for us. In this case, there's not much to see. It was an image. We'll get rid of that. I'll get rid of the table. Because that's the transaction we described, it's highlighted here in yellow. It's this one. And we can equally right click on there and describe the transaction. We'll get the same thing. And we could plot the packets if we wanted, but that's not for this video. We'll point out, because we described that transaction and because it was an image, NetData has put that image in our NetData directory. So there it is. Statistics. Now there's only one client and one server on this chart. So the statistics table is giving us the overall statistics. Same thing, there's more columns you can turn on. And what we're interested in is the per transaction statistics. And here is a statistics chart, sort by count. And yep, so the most things that happened were 79 three-way handshakes, there were 2 of these, and then there was basically 1 of each of these other things. So these transaction timeouts, what can we do here? If we go right click, set highlight color, make it say bright green, replot, and what we'll find is those transactions will be bright green there. Oh, so that was those guys, and they've got the square around them, retransmission timeout in the response. We'll look at those packets when we come to the packet timing chart. Going back to the transactions, another thing what we can do is add a transaction mix, add a dynamic one, and we get this chart. Now I don't want to spend too much time in this video, it's more advanced, but the idea of this chart is who's got the biggest color here, and that's the transaction you should try and improve if you want to improve performance. That's probably enough for an introduction, so we'll finish up there. Stay tuned for the next video where we'll look at that performance chart in a more advanced way.